Welcome to Lead on the podcast for nonprofit leaders navigating change with intention, brought to you by CNA. Social impact consulting, we explore what it really takes to lead with clarity, courage, and consistency in complex times. No binders, no buzzwords, just thoughtful conversations and practical guidance to help leaders and missions move forward. LeadOn is powered by Notebook LM and produced by CNA, Social Impact Consulting.
It's really great to be back diving into this with you today.
Yeah, I'm excited. Today, we are tackling a topic that, well, honestly, it might trigger a little bit of PTSD for some of you listening. We are looking at a piece called Innovation on a Shoestring by Damon Colaluca.
Oh, yeah, that title alone.
Right. Just reading it, I felt completely seen because it feels like a very direct response to this specific brand of exhaustion that's just kind of sitting over the whole sector right now.
Oh, absolutely. It addresses a very visceral pain point for leaders.
Yeah.
It's that exact moment where your funding is totally flat, your staff is completely maxed out, the demand for services is climbing.
And then a board member or a major donor asks that one dreaded question.
Right. Can we just innovate?
Yes. Can we just innovate? I mean, it makes you want to scream because usually when someone on the outside says innovate, what they are really saying is, hey, can you please do twice as much work with half as much money?
Exactly. It's essentially code for burnout.
Yeah.
They treat innovation like it's a lever you can just pull in the basement to release a trapdoor full of money and efficiency.
But, and I think this is why this source material is so vital, the article completely rejects that definition. Colaluca flips the whole narrative. The mission of our deep dive today isn't to figure out how you can do more with less.
Right. It's to prove that innovation is actually a discipline. It's the discipline of redesigning how you create outcomes, specifically because you are dealing with new constraints.
And that distinction is everything for you as a leader. It's not magic, it's mechanics. But before we get into the how of those mechanics, we kind of have to dismantle the who.
Oh, the visionary myth.
Yeah, the visionary myth. We carry around so much cultural baggage about what an innovator is supposed to look like. We have this movie version playing in our heads.
The lone genius.
Exactly, the Steve Jobs archetype. We think true innovation requires this highly charismatic, visionary executive director who, wears black turtlenecks and has these lightning bolt epiphanies at 3 a.m.
And the dangerous part is that if you don't have that person at the helm, you just assume you're stuck.
Yeah.
In the nonprofit world, this really morphs into founder syndrome.
Oh.
You end up just waiting for the heroic leader to come save the organization.
Which the source points out immediately is a total myth. Innovation isn't a personality trait at all. It's a system.
It is a system. And the article references the Stanford Social Innovation Review, or SSIR, which has done some extensive research on this very thing. Their argument is that sustained innovation does not come from one heroic masterstroke.
Right.
It actually comes from systematic exploration, experimentation, and learning.
Which is, frankly, a huge relief. Relying on a personality is just incredibly risky for a nonprofit. If your entire innovation strategy is basically, let's hire a genius, well, you're in major trouble the second that genius leaves for another job.
It's too fragile.
Yeah.
So the question you should be asking isn't who is our visionary? The question is, what system do we currently have for learning and redesign?
Right. You lose the leader, you keep the innovation. Okay, so we're moving from personality to process. But let's get real about the actual context on the ground. We can sit here and talk about systems all day, but if I'm a leader listening to this right now and I can barely make payroll...
Or your team is just drowning in compliance paperwork.
Exactly. How on earth am I supposed to design a whole new system when I have zero money and zero time?
This is where the source material gets really fascinating. It introduces a concept called the constraint audit.
I love this term. I mean, it sounds very official, but the actual concept is quite radical for our sector.
It really is. Usually we look at constraints. Things like staffing limits, cash flow timing, terrible technology, strict compliance rules. We look at them as the enemy. They're the things stopping us from doing the real work.
But the constraint audit asks you to view them as design inputs.
Precisely. You stop fighting them and start using them.
Let's unpack that for a second. How is being broke or having 20-year-old software a design input? It just feels like a roadblock.
Well, think about architecture. Let's say you are commissioned to build a house on the side of a steep, rocky cliff. Gravity and that steep slope, those are your constraints.
Right.
Now, a bad architect looks at that and complains that the ground isn't flat. They spend a fortune trying to blast the mountain to flatten it out.
And they usually fail, right? You end up fighting nature and going way over budget.
Exactly. But a great architect doesn't ignore the cliff. They design the house specifically to anchor into that rock. The constraint actually dictates the shape of the solution. The house ends up being beautiful because of the cliff, not in spite of it.
That is such a powerful mental shift. So instead of sitting in a staff meeting saying, guys, we could really fix this program if only we had 5 more staff members.
Which you don't have.
Which you don't have. Instead, you say, how do we deliver this exact outcome, assuming we will never get those 5 staff members?
Yes. You audit the reality. You look at the limits.
Mm-hmm.
And the source mentions some specific barriers.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's a lack of transportation for your clients. Maybe it's a language barrier. Maybe it's that you are heavily dependent on a flaky partner organization.
You treat those as the parameters of the design. It shifts your brain out of complaining mode, which is just exhausting, and puts it right into solving mode.
It does. But the source makes a very crucial point here about how you actually implement this. You cannot try to redesign the whole organization at once. That is absolute suicide.
It's too much.
Way too much. You have to pick one program area, just one, and you apply those specific constraints to that single problem.
Okay, so we've accepted our constraints. We aren't fighting reality anymore. Now we actually have to build the solution. And the source uses the term frugal innovation. Now, I have to be honest, the word frugal often triggers a pretty negative reaction.
Oh, definitely.
It sounds like code for cheap or lowering the quality of the service.
I know. It really has a bad rap. It sounds like we're just cutting corners to save a buck. But going back to SSIR, frugal innovation is a legitimate, high-level design methodology. It is not about being cheap. It's about adoption, and it's about design principles.
So what does that mean in a nonprofit context?
It usually means simplifying service steps. It's about reducing handoffs, designing for the realities of the client, and making the delivery of the service easier rather than more complex.
Give me a concrete example of what that looks like in practice, because simplifying sounds easy in theory, but we all know how complexity just kind of creeps into everything we do.
Sure. Let's say you run a housing assistance program. The lavish innovation mindset says, okay, we need a $500,000 Salesforce integration and a custom mobile app, so clients can upload their documents directly.
Which requires an expensive consultant, a full year of staff training, ongoing licensing fees, and it probably crashes the first week anyway.
Exactly. And if you don't have the grant money for that, you end up doing nothing. You stay stuck.
Yeah.
But a frugal innovation mindset looks at the constraint. The constraint is we have no money, and our clients mostly have limited data plans on older phones.
So the app is out anyway.
Right. So you ask, why does our intake form have 40 questions? Can we cut it down to 10? Why do they have to come all the way to our office during business hours? Can we just do this intake via a simple text message?
It's about removing friction, not just cutting costs.
Precisely. You are designing for the client's actual reality. If you make the process simpler just because you couldn't afford the complex software, you actually end up with a much better user experience. The limitation forced you to be elegant.
I love that phrasing so much. The limitation forced you to be elegant. But there is still a risk factor here for leaders. Even a frugal idea is a change. And tired nonprofit teams are absolutely terrified of change because they just don't have the energy to recover if it goes wrong.
That is the #1 barrier. It's the fear of failure. And honestly, it is completely justified. Nonprofits are punished for failure way more severely than the private sector.
Oh, without a doubt.
So Colaluca suggests a workaround. You have to replace the scary idea of a big pilot program with what he calls a micro-experiment.
Oh, the big pilot. I can physically feel the collective shudder of our listeners right now. The giant binder, the steering committee, the 6-month rollout plan.
And if that big pilot fails after 6 months of buildup, team morale completely tanks, is devastating. So you kill the big pilot. You use the micro-experiment instead.
What exactly defines a micro-experiment? How is it fundamentally different from a team just, trying stuff out?
The source lists 4 non-negotiable criteria. If it doesn't meet all 4 of these, it is not a micro-experiment. First, it has to be time-boxed, meaning it lasts 2 to 4 weeks, max.
2 to 4 weeks. That is incredibly fast for our sector. Sometimes we take 2 weeks just to schedule the pre-meeting to discuss the actual meeting.
That's exactly the point. It forces momentum, and it stops the committee from forming. Second, it has to be measurable, but it tracks exactly one outcome metric, just one.
So you aren't trying to measure, did we end poverty in our city?
No.
Right.
You're measuring, did the wait time in the lobby go down by 10 minutes? Or did the show-up rate for appointments go up this week?
Keep it simple. Don't drown in the data. What's the third rule?
Third, it has to be cheap. You must use existing tools. No buying new software platforms. Use a shared spreadsheet, use a piece of paper, use a whiteboard in the break room.
And the fourth one?
The fourth rule, and this is arguably the most critical one, it must be reversible. There can be no major sunk cost.
Reversible. Why do you single that out as the most important?
It comes down to psychological safety. If I walk up to a stressed-out program director and say, hey, we're going to change the entire intake process forever, starting Monday, they will fight me. They will defend the status quo to the death because the risk feels too high.
It feels like a one-way door. If we walk through it, we can't ever come back if it's a disaster.
Exactly. But if I say to that same director, hey, we're going to try this weird new way of doing intake for exactly 14 days, and if it sucks, we go right back to the old way on day 15. They will say yes.
That lowers the stakes completely. It turns this big, scary change into just play. It makes innovation feel safe enough for a tired team to actually try it.
And getting them to try is half the battle. You are artificially lowering the threshold for them to say yes.
So the reversibility is actually the engine of the culture change. You aren't asking your staff for blind faith. You're just asking for a 2-week lease on a new idea.
Ideally, yes. And what usually happens is that after 2 weeks, if the frugal innovation actually works and makes their lives easier, they won't want to go back anyway. But they desperately needed that exit strategy just to take the first step.
Okay, so we're running micro-experiments, we're being frugal, but we have to address the elephant in the room here. Resources.
Always.
Even a micro-experiment takes some amount of time and attention. And if every single person on staff is maxed out, where does that capacity actually come from?
This brings us to a section of the source material that I think is the hardest truth for leaders to hear. Colaluca is very blunt about this. Innovation is rarely funded by extra capacity. It is almost always funded by trade-offs.
Meaning you need a stop doing list?
You have to have a stop doing list.
Oof. Everyone loves to start new things. Nobody ever wants to stop things.
It is the hardest part of the job. But if you want to add something new, you mathematically must subtract something old. The source suggests looking closely at your operations. What do you cut? You cut low-impact activities.
Like legacy programs that don't really fit the current need anymore.
Yes. Or internal processes that just create friction and don't serve the client.
But stopping a legacy program is deep, emotional work. Maybe that program was started by the founder 20 years ago. Maybe a really vocal board member loves that one annual gala, even if it loses money and absolutely burns out the staff every year.
It is highly emotional. People's professional identities are often tied to these legacy programs. But the expert agrees and frames this very specifically as an act of leadership. You simply cannot ask your team to innovate if you, as the leader, are unwilling to clear the deck for them.
That is a brilliant way to put it. It's not just about cutting costs. It's about making space.
Exactly. The Force describes this as, quote, where the money is. You fund the new reality by having the courage to stop the old reality.
So we have the constraint audit, the micro-experiments, and the stop doing list. But there is another resource we haven't touched on yet, and it lives outside our walls. Partnerships.
Yes. And I'm really glad you brought this up because the source takes a bit of a necessary jab at how nonprofits traditionally handle partnerships.
You mean the classic logo swap?
The logo swap. We are partners because your logo is on my website and my logo is on yours. That is just PR. That's branding. That does not create capacity. The source argues that in this shoestring reality, partnerships have to be treated as actual capacity.
What does that mean in practice, treating a partner as capacity?
It means real, tangible sharing. A good partnership shares staff time. It shares physical space. It shares outreach channels to avoid duplicating efforts. It's about finding someone who can fill a service gap so you don't have to hire a new person to do it.
So if I'm running a housing organization and I realize my clients need mental health support, instead of trying to find the budget to hire a mental health counselor, I form a deep operational partnership with an existing mental health clinic down the street.
Exactly. You integrate. If you can offload a specific service to a partner who already does it better, you just magically created capacity for your own team to focus on redesigning your core program.
Now, I want to pivot for a second to the people we all ultimately report to, the board of directors. Because I can easily imagine a listener getting really fired up about all this today. They think, yes, we're going to run a 2-week experiment. We're going to cut this legacy program.
And then the board completely freaks out.
Exactly. Boards tend to get very nervous when they hear the word experiment. They hear risk. They think you are gambling with donor money. So how do you explain this experimentation to a nervous board?
You have to fundamentally reframe the language you use with them. The expert advice here is to frame your innovation not as taking a risk, but as an act of stewardship.
Innovation is stewardship. Say more about that. That's a massive shift in perspective.
Well, think about it from their point of view. In a highly volatile funding environment, if you do not change, you will die. If you just keep running the exact same expensive, inefficient program while your funding drops, that is the actual risk.
Doing nothing is reckless.
Doing nothing is the most reckless thing you can do. Disciplined redesign, using these careful micro-experiments, that is how you actively protect the mission.
So the script for the board isn't, hey, we want to try something crazy and see what happens. It's, we are testing this minor change to ensure we are still financially viable in 5 years.
Exactly. You tell them we are conducting a controlled, highly reversible, low-cost test to improve our efficiency and protect donor dollars. That is absolute music to a board's ears.
It turns the conservative, risk-averse instinct of the board, which is usually a massive blocker, into an ally for change.
And remember, the source points out that according to independent sector research, public trust in nonprofits actually remains relatively high, especially compared to trust in government or media.
That's true.
Leaders need to lean on that trust. Use that bank of trust to explain to your stakeholders that this change is about responsibility. It's not chaos. It's vital adaptation.
Okay, we have covered some serious ground today. We debunked the lone visionary myth. We learned how to audit our constraints as design inputs. We embraced frugal, reversible micro-experiments, and we had the tough talk about the stop doing list.
It is a really robust playbook for leaders.
It is. Now, I want to make sure we leave everyone with something highly practical. The source material includes a checklist of specific Shoestring innovation moves. I want to do this rapid fire. I'll tee up the move, and you knock it down with the why or the how. Ready?
Let's do it.
Move number 1, the starting line.
Choose exactly one program to redesign. Do not try to boil the ocean. Pick the program that is causing your staff the most pain or the one losing the most money.
Move number 2, the reality check.
Run a constraint audit. Name your top 3 limitations. Maybe it's money, time, and tech. And explicitly write them down as design rules. Tell the team, we must solve this problem without spending more than $100.
Move number 3, the focus.
Identify one single client friction point. Where do they get confused? Where do they drop out of the process? Redesign that specific step and nothing else.
Move number 4, the team.
Invite 2 frontline staff members onto the redesign team. Innovation requires reality, and the frontline staff know the daily reality much better than the executive team does. Do not do this in a closed boardroom.
Move number 5, the feedback loop.
Ask your actual clients what is hardest about accessing your service. And the critical part here, actually act on what they tell you, even if their answer hurts your feelings or challenges your assumptions.
Move number 6, the experiment.
Create a simple learning log. Track what you tried, what you learned, and what you changed. Keep it to a 2 to 4 week window, measure one metric, and if it fails, you only lost a couple of weeks.
And finally, move number 7, the hard one.
Build the stop doing list. Pick one thing, just one internal process or legacy program, and pause it for 60 days. See if anyone actually misses it. If they don't, kill it permanently.
I love that. Pausing something for 60 days feels so much safer than canceling it forever. It's a great psychological trick, not just for the staff, but for the leader too.
It makes the subtraction feel manageable. Anyone can stand anything for 60 days.
So if you want to go deeper into this, because we really are just skimming the surface here, the source mentions some great tools and resources.
Yes, CNA offers a change capacity index. It's a diagnostic tool that helps you assess if your team is actually culturally ready for this kind of reinvention, because you really don't want to push the gas pedal if the engine is already broken.
You definitely need to know if the chassis can handle the speed.
They also offer Spark cards, which are these great prompts specifically for program redesign. If you and your team are just stuck staring at a blank whiteboard, they help you ask the right questions. And for teams that need more hands-on support, there is the Evolve ED Change Consulting practice at CNA.
And there was a quick reading list too, right? For the folks who want to really geek out on the underlying theory.
Absolutely. The recommended books are fantastic. You have The Lean Startup by Eric Ries, which is really the foundation for all this micro-experiment thinking. Switch by Chip and Dan Heath, which is just essential reading for understanding human behavior change.
Oh, I love Switch.
It's so good. Then there's The Fearless Organization by Amy Edmondson, which is the absolute Bible for building psychological safety. And finally, The Art of Possibility by Rosamund Stone Zander and Benjamin Zander, which is a beautiful book for learning how to reframe your constraints.
Perfect. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I I'm really struck by how empowering this whole perspective is. We started the conversation with that exhausted nonprofit leader hearing, can we just innovate, and feeling totally defeated by it.
Right.
But we've ended up in a place where disciplined innovation is actually the exact path out of that exhaustion.
That is the ultimate takeaway here. Innovation isn't just about doing better work for your clients. It's about creating a more sustainable, sane way of working for your staff.
I want to leave you all with a final thought to mull over, building on that idea of sanity. What if true innovation in this sector isn't actually about the external outcomes at all? What if a disciplined practice of frugal innovation, of finally killing the zombie programs and removing the friction, what if that is actually your most powerful staff retention strategy?
Oh, that is a fascinating way to look at it.
Because when a talented team is stuck doing low-impact bureaucratic work that they know deep down doesn't matter, it drains their belief in the mission. It makes them cynical.
It really does. It feels like wasted potential.
So when you, as a leader, use these constraints to cut that dead weight, you aren't just saving a few dollars. You're signaling to your best people your time matters, our shared mission matters. We are only going to focus on the things that actually work. And that restored belief might just be the thing that keeps your best people from walking out the door.
That energy is a resource more valuable than any grant.
That's a wrap on this episode of LeadOn. If today's conversation gave you something to think about, we invite you to subscribe and share it with a fellow nonprofit leader. You can find us on Spotify and at leadonpodcast.com. Until next time, stay grounded, stay curious, and lead on.